Do you know how amazing you actually are? We're going to talk about that today. Infinite possibilities, changing the operating system to a new operating system, and being amazing, deliberate creators using the capacity of our mind and consciousness to create our world and more with the wonderful Carol Talbot. It's going to be an expansive conversation. I can't wait. Stay tuned. Coming up on ATP.
You got to accentuate the positive. Wow, I feel good. A little bit of feel good goes a long way.
You're listening to Karen Swain, teacher of deliberate creation, accentuating the positive, showing you a way to a better life.
Accentuating the positive, it's not just fad, it's sanity. Who in their right mind would accentuate anything else?
If you feel like that's what you want to do.
Hello, and welcome to another show, Accentuating the Positive with Karen Swain on the United Public Radio Network and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network on 107.7 and 105.3 FM syndicated radio all over the world, and we're streaming on quite a few platforms today. I have to say to our live audience, if you're tuning in, that this is a recorded show because my guest today, welcome Carol Talbot. It's Carol Talbot. Welcome to the show, Carol. An amazing woman. I'm loving her already. And we've just met just a few minutes ago. She is in Dubai, in Asia, on the other side of the world. And so the live show doesn't work for her. It's like 2 a.m. in the morning when we stream live. So we've set up a recording today and we're recording it. But I'd love to hear all your comments and questions and all your wisdom as you normally do on the live show. So please leave it in the comments during the recording or when the recorded live is playing. So yes, I have an amazing woman to introduce you to, Carol Talbot. So great to meet you, darling one.
Well, I'm looking forward to opening some possibilities during our conversation. We did just before we started this session.
Absolutely. She's speaking my language. This lady is speaking my language. Let me tell you a little bit about Carol and what she's up to. Carol wants to help audiences, my audience and any audience you're speaking to, know how their reality is being shaped from the inside out, how to shift your signal to change what's showing up in your world, and how to begin accessing higher levels of perception, performance, and potential. Most people try and change their lives by changing what they do or the circumstances of their life. But Carol Talbot became fascinated by something else entirely. The masters and the so-called superhumans who seemed to operate beyond normal limits and asked different questions. And if they can do it, she thought, so can I. Right, if they can do it, we all can, right? Masters aren't just there to be masters, they're there to teach us about our mastery, right, Carol?
That's what I believe, and that's the question that's driven me. If they can do it, why can't I? That's been behind every ology, therapy, course, journey, trip that I've done, and all the wonderful masters and mentors that I've had the opportunity to study with as well.
Yeah. So the questions became an obsession, Carol says here in a bio, and ultimately led to multi-dimensional intelligence, a framework that reveals how your identity, frequency, and coherence are not abstract concepts, but the very architecture shaping your reality. Absolutely. I'm hearing you, girl. When that signal becomes precise and stable, which we'll talk about, reality doesn't need to be chased. It begins to organize around you. For more than 3 decades, Carol has immersed herself in the exploration of what humans are truly capable of. She is a visionary leader in human potential, consciousness studies, quantum morphogenic science, and her work bridges science and spirit, translating the physics of consciousness into practical tools that activate dormant potential. And you've done a PhD in quantum morphogenic physics. which she stands at the intersection of advanced science and consciousness and human performance. Whew, that's a mouthful. And you've got a couple of books happening. You've got this one, Reimagine You.
Yes, that one was based on my thesis. So my thesis was bioregenesis of the DNA blueprint through source feeding, and source feeding is the breatharian path.
And this one, is this your latest book?
Yeah, this one, Multidimensional Intelligence, is the latest one.
Activating the higher blueprint for human evolution. And what can people expect to find in this one?
Opening up to new possibilities. So it's understanding that multidimensional intelligence is helping you understand how to operate, transmit, and receive beyond linear thinking, beyond the models of IQ, EQ, even spiritual intelligence, and understanding who you really are. And everything is the frequency, the signals, the light, and our multidimensional architecture, that only a portion of our consciousness is stationed in this identity. And as you strengthen your signal and connection, then you open up to the possibilities at the soul level, the oversoul, the avatar, the rishi, the Bodea, all the way up to source.
Amazing. So let me ask you, how did you start getting interested in these topics, and what took you to Dubai?
Okay, where shall I start? All right, I've always been a lifelong learner. I've always had that curious mind. And I remember as a child having, as many people do, those dreams of flying that felt so real. And then as you get older and as you go into the condition and programming of education or mainstream education, those dreams shut down. But the question I was left with there was, if they're so real in the dream time, is it possible to make it a reality in this space-time? And so those are the kind of questions that have driven me to read extensively, to study unusual subjects. And as I said, I've had the opportunity to also study with many different masters and mentors that aren't so much in mainstream media, that you just come across through synchronicities. And there definitely have been synchronicities. So why I ended up in Dubai was, many people have also had those times when your reality crumbles in some way. So my reality crumbling at that time happened to be, I'd been in a long relationship with who I thought was the love of my life. As it turned out, I wasn't the love of his life. It's easy to laugh now, but actually at the time I really was devastated. And we've all had that, whether it's a financial crash, an emotional crash, a physical crash. Your reality crumbles in some way, and you reach that sink or swim time. And for me, I thought, let me swim, and let me swim in different waters. I also, Karen, during that time, to help me through, I came in contact with an unusual group of people. They're called the Brahma Kumaris, and they have, they have certain beliefs around 5,000-year cycles. They're vegetarian or vegan. They're celibate, which wasn't a problem. I'd just come out of a long relationship. So, but they were some of the kindest people I've ever met. And they just accepted me, no questions asked. And I used to get up extraordinarily early in the morning and drive quite a long way in the morning just to spend some time with them. And I also remember one very unusual experience when I went to one of their larger gatherings. And I remember sitting with hundreds of people, and the elders at the front did something called drishti. And drishti is when they use their gaze and there's a transfer of energy. And this was, decades ago. So I was very sort of new to this, although my mother was very into the esoteric and philosophy of Uspensky and Gurdjieff and things like that. But I remember as they went round the room, I felt a wave of energy go across me. And I looked up and she was looking at me before she went on to the next person. And that really left an impact. So when I decided that I would rebuild somewhere else in the world, it could have been anywhere. But one of the things that influenced my decision was that there was a group here in Dubai. And I did go to that group when I first arrived in Dubai. And again, they made me feel very, very welcome. So again, that was the pivotal step that brought me to this part of the world. And of course, that's nearly 3 decades ago. It was a very, very different place. It's moved from being a small town, which very few people had heard about, to a place where most people aspire to visit.
Yeah, absolutely. Carol and I were just talking about Dubai before we started the recording. I think I've never been there. I've had a few family members that have been there, lived there for a while, actually, younger family members chasing, because there's a lot of business opportunities over there, like work opportunities. And I think the pay is quite well. It's a place that does fascinate me, actually. Absolutely fascinates me. But the Brahma Kumaris, I also bumped up with them when I was very young. When I was about 19, I found what was called they were called the Raj Yoga, and they were teaching open-eyed meditation, and I was all for that. I didn't know anything about anything then. They talked about reincarnation and all that stuff, and I'm like, yes, I want to hear about this stuff. Well before internet, and not a lot of books around, talking about that stuff in those days. But they were doomsdayers. They had a date that the world was going to end, and it was like within months of me joining them, and maybe about 6 months or a few months. And of course, the world didn't end, but their whole organization had to change and so they changed their name. They shut down the address because it was in Bondi, where I lived in Sydney at the time, and they moved out to the Blue Mountains and started retreat centers out there and called themselves the Brahma Kumaris. And I was part of the Academy of Light for many years, showcasing New World teachers, and that organization was quite involved in them as well. So wow, that's synchronistic that you also.
So maybe the world didn't end in the way that they expected, and maybe there were, and as we know, if you look back at our own spiritual paths and scientific paths, that it has changed in terms of how people perceive who they are and what they are.
Yeah, well, maybe the information they had was being misinterpreted. Like it's not ending, like some aspect of life is ending, but not all of life is ending. They were interpreting it like everyone's going to die, like the world's going to blow up, which a lot of people still talk about, like 40, 50 years later. I don't know, how old am I? 40 years later, they're still talking about how the world's going to end soon. I have a good friend, who reckons, we've got 7 years left and kaput, it's all over. And so they're still talking about it. Yeah, the world is going to end. But definitely endings and new beginnings are happening all the time. The ending of an old way, and there's a lot more endings we need to really anchor the consciousness that you are talking about, that we're talking about today. There's a lot of endings that need to happen to get this in place, to change. So were they teaching what you're teaching now in Dubai back then, or how did you come across this work?
No, this what I'm doing now has been part of my lifelong search, that I always wanted to be clairvoyant, clairaudient. It didn't happen for me. And I had so many friends who used to go, "Oh, did you see that, Carol? Did you hear that?" And I'd go, "No." And of course, I expected it to come with bells, whistles, a big bang, fireworks 3 times, so I know I didn't miss it. And as you know, as our gifts come online, they come online more as a whisper, that because we're conditioned and programmed for noise, and that there is so much noise around us, and we're conditioned and programmed to seek outside of us, we miss what's going on. And yet, if you think about it, Karen, we've all had in those early times, the times when you think of somebody and they call instantly, or you have an idea that comes fully formed and you think those are just random. And actually, they're indications that we're connected to a field of infinite wisdom, infinite creativity, innovation, everything you could possibly wish to know. It's there. So it's not about achieving, gaining, getting. It's about letting go, so that you can hear it, see it, feel it, know it, and have a stronger connection. So one of the metaphors I like to give is around, most people have a Netflix subscription, which means when they set up an account and a password, when they log in, they can watch anything that's streaming on that platform. If they want to watch something that's on another platform, they set up another password, another account, and log in. And they miss that there's another streaming platform that's extremely advanced.
Yeah, exactly.
That you don't need to set up an account for. You don't need a password. You're already connected. It's about strengthening that connection, because you can have the most advanced streaming platform in the world. But if you have a poor Wi-Fi connection, it's going to be glitchy. You're not going to be able to tune in. And so it is. Most of us have a glitchy connection, and so we can't tune in. And so with the development of multidimensional intelligence, it's about upgrading our connection, upgrading the frequency and the connection, so we can hear more, see more, feel more, and realize that it's already there. And I know you've spoken to many people, and you have a book which cites experiences, near-death experiences. And you know that when people have a near-death experience, many of them cite that they go into a space and field where they can ask a question and they know everything there is to know about quantum mechanics. The challenge is bringing it back into this reality and bringing it back into language. Because if you think of pure telepathy, and I think trees, animals, other species are lovely examples of pure telepathy, it's pre-language. And language often slows everything down.
I'm sure that you're a fan of the telepathy tapes. Have you been watching the telepathy, or listening, I should say, to the telepathy tapes?
I have, to some of them. And I have a friend of mine, and curiously enough, he's based in Australia. He's a shaman of the highest order, and he is working with one of the people who's been part of the telepathy tapes. And this young lad is also teaching him how to upgrade his telepathic abilities. And it's every time I speak to my friend, it's just absolutely fascinating. And it also, Karen, helped me understand how I receive information. As I shared with you, I chased and went on so many ologies, therapies, and ways to be, clairvoyant, clairaudient, and it just didn't happen for me in that way. And I'm very grateful, because I don't dismiss any of the experiences that I've had have led me to multidimensional intelligence, studying quantum morphogenetic physics. The jigsaw puzzle pieces fit. And it's helped me understand how, to a certain degree, I'm receiving or able to get the information that I get when I do, say, a multidimensional field scan.
I've got a lot to say about that, but where do I want to go? I just want to say, remind me, I want to come back to that, but I just want to say to people listening how amazing you are. I have been showcasing New World teachers for a long time. First with the Academy of Light, live and live events, and then on Sydney Radio, and then recording, and now doing live shows. So it's been a good 20, 25-year journey, speaking with people. And they're few and far between, especially when their PA reaches out to me, or their agent reaches out to me, as yours did, that actually look into me, like, you pronounce my name right, I've written a book. can actually pay any attention to who they're talking to. And you've done the research, and I want to just honor you for that, because that's really special. It really is. I mean, you'd think most people would be like that, but they're not. I just want to honor you for that. But what was it that I wanted to come back to? I said, remind me. My brain's gone into freeze. That we were just talking about morphogenetics.
We would actually. There's a lovely story about quantum morphogenetics. As when you introduced me, you said that I've had a fascination with the masters, the gurus, the superhumans, a series of books that I actually love, and I'm sure you're aware of. The Life and Teachings of the Masters of the Far East. Absolutely love their books. Where they demonstrate all sorts of phenomena, from walking on water, nourishing themselves off universal life energy, manifesting huge feasts and banquets. And again, they demonstrate, I believe, what is possible for us.
Yeah.
So I remember one time coming back from the US, having spent time with one of my masters and mentors, and it may even have been, Karen, get this, I went on a month-long program to learn to walk on water. Did I succeed? Nope.
a month.
Every time.
Yeah.
I can walk on fire, and I do teach that, though. But I was coming back from spending some time with my mentor in the US, and I often at that time stopped by in the UK where my mother lived and spent time with her. And I'm very blessed. My mother was into all sorts of philosophy, Gurdjieff, Ouspensky, as I said earlier, and even her father had books on Madame Blavatsky, Alice Bailey. You can see it's a sort of ancestral path.
Fabulous.
But she showed me a manual that, for some reason, she'd been on a program 25 years previously, and she'd kept the manual. And quite frankly, Karen, it looked really complicated, interesting and complicated. So I said, thank you, looks good, and I'll come back to it later. Landed back in Dubai, and I saw at a local centre there was an interesting talk going on that seemed to have some connection to what I'd just been studying in the US. So I went along to the talk, and I'm sure you've had those times where you walk into the room and you get ding, 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 ding. There's something for me to learn here. Mm-hmm. So I went back the next day to talk with the facilitator. And as we were talking, there were so many connections. He'd actually worked with the mentor that I'd been with in the US, and there's more. He took a phone call, and while he took that phone call, he said, Carol, have a look at this manual. It was the same manual my mother had showed me.
Wow.
When I got back home, I called my mum. I said, show me that manual again. His name was on it with his then wife. My mother had attended a program with him 25 years previously.
Wow.
So for me, that was a strong signal that I was to mentor with him, which I did, which led me to quantum morphogenetic physics and getting my thesis and understanding the architecture of our DNA, that it is more than a blueprint for our skin color, eye color. It's far more than our genetic coding, and also our multidimensional architecture, understanding who we really are. So that really started opening the door and accelerating my path to developing multidimensional intelligence, driven by the questions from the masters, the gurus, and also driven by the question of how manifestation and materialization really works. Because having a background in NLP, I was a master trainer and ran certification programs, and it's a fantastic operating system for understanding how we work, how we create patterns. And I always felt there was something more, that materialization and manifestation is more than just think about it, act as if, and understanding how materialization comes in from the multidimensional fields.
Yeah. The multidimensional fields, we were just talking about that. I just did a show on Elevate about dimensions with Kristen and Claudia Edge and Kristen Mishmash. And, the information coming in from the multidimensional fields. We were talking about parallel lives, past lives, other lives, future lives, because, we can have an operating system that is creating our reality and then use a program like NLP, which is, perfectly viable, to change, and then nothing changes. And it's like, why? Because as you say, we're being impacted by the multidimensional dimensions or fields. Like there is karmic resonance and DNA resonance and, stuff we're carrying on our DNA from our lineage. There's a whole lot of stuff going on that a lot of operating systems don't take into account. Let me ask you, do you still say that you're not psychic, or if those psychic abilities expanded?
I tend not to use the word psychic because I feel that I'm not a big fan of labels. And, it still brings to mind the crystal balls, although screeing is beautiful. It's a beautiful gift to be able to scree. And I have a beautiful crystal ball, and no amount of gazing in it produced any impact for me at that time. So I tend to view what I do when I'm gathering information as pre-language. And there's also an element of, I don't know how I know. Our logical mind wants an explanation for everything. It wants the information. And as you know, if you're going to be working in these fields, there's going to be a degree of, I don't know how I know, and I do.
Right, exactly. Which is part of what I call psychic ability. But I know what you mean by psychic. I mean, they're talking about this in Congress now, but they can't use the word psychic because of it.
Yes, exactly.
Because of people thinking about crystal balls and how it's been, so dumbed down as it's only for woo-woo people or not intelligent people or crazy people. And so they call it psionic operations. The psionic asset, they call it, which means the lady who was psychic. The psionic asset. Yeah, I know. Well,
and this is where science and spirituality come together. That they should never have been separated anyway.
Exactly.
It also comes down to developing your level of discernment, because they're quite right in terms of saying, certain parts of spirituality can be a bit woo-woo, and there's a lot of misinformation out there. And I know that you're very aware of that. And so I feel one of our strongest gifts is that sense of knowing. Absolutely. And that sense of discernment. And we've all had that, because you think about, we are electromagnetic beings. So we've all had that experience where you walk into a room and you go, oh, something's a bit off here. Or conversely, you walk into a room and say, oh, lovely atmosphere here. And so actually what your system is doing is reading energy. We all have that ability, except we dismiss it. And moreover, when you become aware of it, you realize that you have the superhuman power, if you want to call it there, but you have the power to shift the energy in a room, with a person, in an environment. These are the more covert ways that we can use our gifts and the frequency that we operate from to hold yourself to a higher standard. And if I go back to, when I was saying the old model of think of it and so it is, there's a lot to be said for that. The challenge is, if I ask people to bring to mind one positive thought and hold that one positive thought for 15 seconds. Their mind becomes fragmented. They lose their focus. They start to drift. And Absolutely. It shows you the lack of coherence and alignment we have internally. That our nervous system is shattered by, the mobile phone goes, the music's playing here, we need to do this, we need to be busy. And so we've forgotten how to be still, how to be silent, and how to be in solitude.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was the Abraham teachings through Esther that said, if you can hold a thought constantly for 17 seconds, then there's the hope of that manifesting reasonably quickly. But as you say, that's not easier said than done. Easier said than done to hold that consistency. So when you're teaching people how to firewalk, I've done firewalking. I did it with Anthony Robbins in '95 in Hawaii. I think he came out to Australia too. Did I do it in Australia? I can't remember, but I've done it a couple of times. Yeah, that's the process, right? So you're walking across hot coals, and you have to. He gives you a thing, cool moss. Like think of cool, and try and hold that as you're walking across hot coals. How do you teach it? How do you teach people to walk across?
I do not do the coolers. I've done Tony Robbins as well, and I actually trained with the people who trained Tony. I was very blessed with studying with Peggy Dillon, who's often referred to as the mother of the Western firewalking movement. And rather than saying cool as ice, cool as moss, I tend to tell people it's 1700 degrees Fahrenheit, 926 degrees centigrade, and very hot. Because I want them to be really aware of what they're capable of. What science has shown us is that by the age of 30, 35, in terms of neurological connections, we're basically hardwired in how we respond, react, and emote in any situation. And what that means is that when you go to any experience, it's like, yeah, I know what's going to happen. I know what we're going to do. I know what we're going to say. You've lost that ability for newness.
Yeah.
When you come to a firewalking experience, we don't have any neurological connections, wiring and firing that tell you how to respond to something like that, except, I've been conditioned and programmed that if I step on that, if I touch that, I will burn. That's our conditioning. That's our programming. So when people do walk across burning hot coals completely unharmed, it creates new neurological connections very, very quickly that beg the question, if I can do that, what else can I do in my life? Where else have I been taught and told that's impossible and it's not true? It also highlights the power of perception. And so one of the beautiful things about when I run the firewalking experience is how people's perception shifts as they see people walk across unharmed. It kind of like maybe I could do it too.
Exactly.
And then you see them do this. And as I said, the whole world opens up. Of course, for some people, it's just a good, coffee shop story. For other people, it rocks their world and shifts something else in them. And this is where, the signal, the frequency that we emit changes, because we all operate from what I call a baseline signature frequency. It's not one frequency, humming one tune. It's a series, like a little bit of a soup. But that soup, that flavor creates the playground that you operate in. Absolutely. And that attracts certain situations, certain people, certain experiences that may not be an exact match, but are enough of a resonant match to play in that field. So working with people, I get their baseline signature frequency of where they are now, but we also get the baseline signature frequency of their optimal timeline. In other words, where they want to be. Now, you can't just slap people into different frequencies because they can't hold it. It's a bit like when we said people have a near-death experience and they access different information, but they find it challenging to bring it back into this reality. Absolutely. So we have to incrementally shift them. The other thing that is important here is their identity. Because when I speak with people, most people have a backstory of who they are, who they've been, And you'll know this, Karen, that we don't need to be clairvoyant, psychic. When people give you their story, you can probably accurately predict where they'll be in 1 year's time, 5 years' time, 10 years' time, based on the story that they continue to carry. And that keeps them in that baseline signature frequency. Yeah. So like an actor gets given a script, a role, the history of that character so he can play it really, really well. Yeah. You've been operating from a script and it needs to change. If you want to be there and you want to shift your frequency, you need to change the backstory. And of course, most of us have been taught that's your story for life. It's not. Yeah.
And there's these, a leopard can't change its spots. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. There's so many things that we say, which continually feed us like how you can't change, you can't change, you can't. But I want to say something about the psychic ability thing, coming back to it. You know, when I was young, being a psychic was for the special people or the woo-woo people or the crazy people. Like there's all sorts of identity wrapped around that. But it wasn't me. It was never me. Even when I studied it, I still didn't have the identity that I'm psychic. And even though I was developing those abilities, did lots of meditation and had the intention to do it, until I changed my identity. When I changed my identity and I started saying, I am psychic, I had a completely different experience. And I was like tapping into the ascended masters for a long time. I could talk to them, but I couldn't see dead people. And so I, again, didn't have that identity. And once I changed that identity, like, yes, I can speak to dead people, you know, like the sort of normal psychics do, again, it shifted. So identity has such a lot to do with it. Such a lot to do with it.
It does. And what I see is, you know, people come to me and it's like, I want to know my purpose, or I want to transition from my job and open up to something else. And I see this in their multidimensional field scans, you know, that their abilities are opening up and they don't know what to do with them because they're still stuck in this baseline signature frequency. And I work quite closely with people. I'm not a great fan of holding on to clients for months and months and months and years and years and years. It's like, you know, 4 sessions, you're on your own. You know, you have these abilities, we've activated them now. But once we get them out of this baseline signature frequency and identity, what happens is they're shifting into a new playground. Different people, different experiences, different opportunities open up. And it's not magic. It's just they're there, but you have to match it. So it's not going out there and finding it. It's being it. And again, this is one of the biggest myths that I didn't understand. And maybe you had that it's all within. And it really is. And when people say, well, Carol, what do I do? What do I do? And it's like, nothing, no thing. It's
no thing.
The silence, the solitude. And it's so very uncomfortable when you first start being in that space. You know, I went, I love unusual experiences. I went to a dark room where you spend 10 days, 10 nights in complete darkness, so dark you can't see your hand in front of your face. It was at Mantachi's purpose-built dark room in North Thailand. And it was also part of a breatharian experience with Jas Maheen. So as you know, she's probably one of the most famous breatharians in the world and lives in Australia. So if I'd gone on an experience like that maybe 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago, I would have been clawing the walls. I was probably afraid of the dark at that time. This turned out to be the most powerful, beautiful experience. I could have easily stayed another 10 days. I didn't want to come out.
Wow.
I would imagine it's the closest to a near-death experience because you lose a sense of sight, you lose a sense of time. And everything slows down and you have your own presence to be with. And for many people, that's uncomfortable. They need the TV on in the background or the radio. They need the noise. So at first it becomes very uncomfortable to be still. But when you do, you can send out a more coherent, clean signal. And then you start shifting your signal, the frequency, you're starting opening to a different playground, and different possibilities find you. You become the resonant match.
Yeah. I think Jazz was the first person to tell me about the dark rooms. And I've contemplated it.
Karen?
Yeah, Jasmine's been on the show a few times. She's amazing. And
But did you do the dark room? Did you do
I
the
haven't
dark
done it. No, I haven't done it. I don't think it's something that it's not calling me, but I have contemplated the experience. Like, what would it be like to be in the dark for all that time? I've seen a few people online do it and come out and share their experiences. I've just looked at it as an interest, but like becoming a breatharian or a source feeder or living on light, that doesn't interest me either. Although maybe I'll do it one day. Pardon?
Yeah, it's we all have different paths, and I think that's where you feel, a resonant match or not, and having that level of discernment of what's for me and what's not.
Yeah. Well, I just the ritual of food is just so beautiful. The whole food. I've contemplated the breatharian thing for years. I've contemplated what it would be like, and there's so much disruption to your daily life because food. I mean, when you think about how much time food takes up in your life, not just cooking it and eating it, but thinking about what to eat, going to the shop, choosing food, like it takes up such a big part of your life. And I really don't know what I do with all that spare time, to tell you the truth, if I didn't eat.
I think the lesson there is understanding that food is a beautiful ritual. I love the way that you say that, because if you think about many religions and many paths always bless the food. And then we look at what's in the supermarket these days and you think, gosh, we're hard pushed to call it food. And that we've been so heavily conditioned and programmed around it that it is a beautiful ritual and it can be nourishing. And it's really understanding that there are many different ways to nourish yourself, from a gorgeous conversation as we're having, to listening to wonderful music, to appreciating art, to sitting and having a cup of tea with friends and having a nourishing conversation.
Absolutely.
So rather than having the addiction that nourishment is only food, understanding that nourishment can come in many, many different ways.
Absolutely. I've got so many stories about that. I just want to share one with you. One of my best friends was a girl called Nikki. She was born in the 60s. Her mother and my mother were good friends. She was born thalidomide affected. So she was sick most of her life. So that was the drug given to pregnant women in the 60s for morning sickness, which deformed a whole lot of children across the world. And she was one of them. And she died at 40, but she was sick most of her life. So we used to have these Nikki dinners. And which we'd get the girls together and go out, and we would sort of try and celebrate her. And I went over to her house, and she's lying in bed sick. I'm too sick to go out. I'm too sick. There's two of us, and we're like, "Get up! You're going out. You're going." And she's like, "No." And she's blue, because she's got deformities in her lungs, so she's blue because she can't breathe. She looks really sick. She looks like she's on death's door. But we force her to get up and go out for dinner. And she's walking to the car, and she's like in her early 30s at this stage. Like an old lady, she can hardly breathe, she can hardly walk. We get her in the car, we pack her off, we go to this pub, we eat pizza, she drinks alcohol, she smokes, we gossip about boys as young girls do. Like, there's nothing healthy that we did. But talk about nourishment, like the connection with her girlfriends, the laughter, being out amongst people in a busy sort of pub, restaurant environment. When I drove her home that night, she skipped to the car. She was flushed with, beautiful red blood cells. She wasn't blue anymore. She had lots of energy. She was laughing. Like, she was so nourished from the experience, not the food, not the wine, not the cigarettes, but the experience. And it was amazing to see the change in her from, driving her there to driving her home. Just to have that experience of connection with friends, and it's amazing what nourishes us. Yeah, not necessarily the food. I don't know how nourishing pizza is, but yeah.
That's a whole different subject when we go, because my thesis was bioregenesis of the DNA blueprint through source feeding. So again, I couldn't be writing a thesis unless I'd done some experimentation with it. So it and Jazz always says it takes a certain frequency to be able to hold that, and it's certainly not a path suited for everybody or that everybody wants to follow. For me, it was, is it a way to tidy up my DNA? And because based on my research, understanding DNA more as a transmitter and receiver of consciousness, I wanted to start tidying up my DNA and see if it created a difference in terms of opening up to new abilities. And it did.
Yeah. So what new abilities did it open up?
Well, I'd written my book based on my thesis, and I have long gaps between books, Karen. When I talk long gaps, I'm talking about 8 to 10 years. And when I finish a book, there is no idea in my mind to write another one. So when I had one of those nights shortly after publishing my book on my thesis, I had one of those nights where I couldn't sleep. And so rather than toss and turn, I decided to get up. And that night, I mapped out the whole of the book on multidimensional intelligence. And I thought I was writing another book. I took a month and got the first draft done and then refined it. You've written books, so you know how the process works. And I thought that was it. As I was writing, I had a call with somebody who reached out to me that I'd met. This is where the seeds are planted and the synchronicities come in. I'd been on a program in Sedona many years before, and I'd stayed in touch with one of the people from that program sporadically. And I say kept in touch, it's like once every couple of years we sent each other a message. But he sent me a message and he said, Carol, I have to speak with you. So we set up a time to call. He's based in the US, and he shared with me some information that planted some seeds for me to develop the multidimensional field scans. And as a result of the multidimensional field scans, in came the entrainment series, which is a set of 5 audio programs with specific frequencies, non-audible subliminals, to again help people move from this baseline signature frequency and accelerate their path to their optimal timeline to get into coherence, resonance, alignment, and embodiment. And I also added another one there called threshold for that time when because we live in a time-space reality where there's a gap between alignment and it materializing in the outside world. I noticed that many people go into doubt in that phase and they end up in this yo-yo phase of back here, and then it's like, no, I'm going for it, and they get so far, nothing's happening, back to here. So how to keep them going so that they know that the house is being built in the multidimensional fields on the morphogenetic field that maybe you can't see, but the house is definitely being built, and it takes time to put in the plumbing, the wiring, the electrics, to bring everything in that it can come into materialization. So there was the entrainment series, and then also the mastery mapping frequency technology, the technology being shifting people from here to here, not any device. It's literally a mentoring program that shifts people, but measuring their frequencies as we go to keep them on track. So I was creating a few landing pages for the book for this, and then I thought, I think I need to create a whole website, because this is moving into a whole body of work which gives structure to helping people really shift and starts to answer the questions that were driving me, but maybe help other people who have similar questions. So it came about very, very quickly. I did extensive testing with the multidimensional field scans because as I said earlier, there was that degree of, I don't know how I know. And I've always been very skeptical and had a high level of discernment. So when I'd go off on programs here and there with a lot of mainstream gurus or where there's a lot of followers, yet although I wanted to be part of the crowd, there'd be something in me that goes, there's something off here that's not quite right. And I didn't know what it was. And of course, now I have a different level of appreciation of the fact that I had that level of discernment. I had that level of knowing, which I wasn't aware of. So after extensive testing with friends and then friends of friends, because with friends, I found that I had to be very careful that my own perception didn't creep in, because they're a mirror of what's in your field. And so I remember one client said to a friend of mine who'd referred her, how did she know about that past life in Egypt? I don't know. What I do know is, and whether it's true or not, we don't know, but she'd shared with my friend that a few weeks previously she had been to somebody who does past lives and had been told of a past life in Egypt. So whether it's true or not, that was in her field. And so it's just what I receive is just a mirror of a field. Another friend, when I was in experimentation phase, I found myself going, that doesn't seem like the person I know. And I thought, catch yourself, Carol, switch off. It's nothing to do with me. It's nothing to do with my perception. And it landed very well with her. I just went with what came out. So as I said, it comes pre-language, which is quick because it's all there. Permission is key, but what takes the time is to put it into language.
How does the multidimensional scan work? Are you scanning someone's field? Because you sent it to me and you said, this is not a psychic reading. So what's reading what? I don't understand how they work exactly.
Okay, I say it's not a psychic reading because it's not psychic in the traditional sense of psychic. Could it be called psychic in some ways by many people who are psychic? Absolutely. It's a different form of knowing.
So it's actually you reading someone's field. It's like you reading it. You're not putting it to an AI system.
No. I take myself out of the equation. I mirror their field. So I don't see anything, hear anything, feel anything. I have to have permission. I will not open a field unless I have permission. And as you know, in this work, we have to hold ourselves to a higher standard. So if somebody says, can you look at a friend's, can you do, unless they give me their permission, it's a no. And then, as I said, I go into a particular state, which I call the 0 point field.
Okay.
Maybe other people may call it something different, but again, it's a point of stillness. I have their name, their date of birth, permission. They may or may not have answered some questions. I may or may not know them. Then I put it into a structure. I scribble, and then I put it into a structure which ends up as a 10 to 14 page report under specific headings like energetic signature. I look at the 12 chakra system and give percentages, your DNA strands, timeline options, in other words, different paths that may be open to you. I also share karmic patterns and ancestral patterns. So think of it like many of the people...
I'm still confused how the information comes, because I guess that I'm only seeing this through my paradigm and the words that I would use, like psychic or channeling, like you channel the information, or you can feed the information into an AI system and that can spit it out. I mean, I'm not sure exactly how the information's coming, but it's coming through your mind and body. Is it? And you're saying it's not me doing it. Is it channeled information? I'm not quite sure.
I don't use the word channeled, and I'm not a fan of channeling, because when you understand that there are portions of our identity stationed at the soul level, the oversoul, avatar, rishi, Bodhaya level, then what I want to tap into is more of me, rather than bringing in any separate identity. So bringing in more of me. So, as I said, the way that I describe it is pre-language, that it's like receiving a zip file. And I don't know what...
It's a download. You get a download.
Yeah, so...
Is that a better way of saying?
What's in the zip file until I unzip it and put it into a report, because there's no language, there's no feelings. What I will say is, when I am opening a field for somebody who has, like yourself, very, very connected, I do have certain feelings in my head, maybe certain frequencies, but it's extremely subtle. But that will indicate that I know their chakra levels are going to be extraordinarily high. And I don't have so many of those. Yours were the upper chakras extraordinarily high, and I hope you know that.
I have to tell people that Carol did, offer it to me, and I sent you an email saying, how did you do this? Like, I still am not quite 100% sure. I think I'm 90% sure of exactly how you're doing it. Are you using an AI system to articulate the words? Because it felt very much like there was, we can use AI to sort of make our words, sound a bit more coherent.
I run it through AI at the end to put it into the report format and to clean it up. So that's how I use
exactly.
AI.
Okay, exactly.
And as I said, I've done extensive research, and what I will say, there is still a degree of I don't know how I know, and I don't know how these work. And I'm okay with that now. The reason I did extensive testing was because of my own skepticism. And every now and then I still have doubt because, sometimes people, there is a small form to complete. Sometimes people give me a lot of information. Sometimes I get the name and date of birth, and that's all. And I send it off, and I don't know. I've never met, spoken, nothing about the person, nothing. And then when we speak, if they choose to have the option where they have a session with me afterwards, so that I can clarify certain things on their scan, then that's when they usually say, wow, because it's a mirror. It's like, Karen, we can't see our own backside. So I find that often people feel that their life is on a loop, that they feel like they're wandering around in the dark and they're tripping on the same wires and they can't see what they're bumping into. Yeah. So it gives them a satellite map. It switches on the light, like understanding karmic patterns or ancestral patterns. I was speaking to a friend yesterday, and, she's had issues where money flows and then it stops. Money flows and then it stops.
Yeah.
And the stop-start. And she realized from an ancestral pattern that her father had had a successful business and it had collapsed. Mm-hmm. And so her stop-start is that she doesn't want to run that same pattern. Mm-hmm. Now, once you have that awareness, once the light goes on, you can move the wires.
Yeah.
So that's the reason that I also say it acts like an activation, because it's, once you've seen what you've seen, you can't unsee it, and it starts creating shifts and changes. Of course, people can also turn off the light and can continue tripping. But it gives you the satellite view of, that's why that's happening. And most people say there's an air of familiarity. Of course there should be, because it's a mirror of their field. And I close their field afterwards, and I close my field afterwards. So I don't have any memory. I don't want their field in mine, and vice versa. So I close it.
Yeah. It's fascinating.
I describe it, that there's an air of mystery.
Well, I'm glad you explained it to you, because as I said, when I read it, I'm like, how did she do this? Because she said she's not psychic. So I was a bit confused how it happened. But I would put what you do into the psychic category. I know that you don't want to use that word, or the channeling category, or the download. you call it mirroring language. I just need to do a station ID break. Here we go. You're listening to ATP Media, Awakening and Expanding Consciousness on the United Public Radio Network and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network on 107.7 and 105.3 FM, syndicated radio, hitting about 120 countries and streaming on 8 platforms. And my guest today is Carol Talbot, and we're talking about infinite possibilities, changing the operating system, deliberate creation, being a genius manifestor. What do we want to call it? Opening new possibilities, quantum morphogenic physics, accessing the morphogenic field. Yeah, we're talking about all sorts of delicious things today on the show. I just wanted to share a little story with keeping the faith. Like you said, I think we want something to happen, then we think it can happen, then we know it's going to happen, and it doesn't happen in the buffer of time that's been allocated for it to happen. And then we lose the faith and we say, this is not going to happen. We start, going downhill. Years ago, I was living as a single mum under this lady's in a little flat she had in her house that she built with my daughter. And she booted us out, as I was booted out of many places. And I had to find somewhere to live, which was always traumatic. You've got a young child, they're like, I don't want to move. Her sons were friends with her, and it was, a nice setup. And she's like, I'm moving my relatives, please. So I didn't think I could afford anything, but I asked my guides, why am I moving? And I was a very small little place, and they said, you're expanding and you need a bigger place because you're expanding and you're going to start teaching. And I'm like, I can't afford a bigger place. But I put up houses all over the flat and said, right, I'm going to move into a bigger place. I couldn't afford a bigger place. So logically it wasn't going to happen. But I kept the faith, and I looked and I looked and I looked and I looked through the real estate, and I started losing the faith. And then I went to a friend's barbecue and I met this guy that ran personal growth courses. Don't you love it, the way the universe, synchronicity? And I was telling him about my dilemma. And the first thing he said was, keep the faith, don't lose faith. It'll come. And it was just that reminder that I needed to not lose that it's going to happen. It will happen. It's there for me. And to go into it's never going to happen. And then I bumped into, on the street when I was, again, house hunting, I bumped into my yoga teacher. She said, what are you doing? I said, I'm looking for somewhere to live. The next time I went to yoga, she said nothing to me on the street. She said, we have a house that maybe you might like to consider. It belongs to myself and my husband, but we're living in a flat that belongs to his parents, so we're not accessing the house, but there's a little student renting at the moment. If you don't mind sharing with one of his students, because he was a teacher, we'll give it to you, and, the rent will be very reasonable. This house was massive. It wasn't a mansion, but it had these massive rooms, and the rent was next to nothing. And so exactly what I wanted to manifest happened. I moved into this massive house. My little daughter had this young lady that lived there with us who she became best friends with. And then I started running courses out of this house because there were these massive rooms and I could fit lots of people in there. But it was that message, keep the faith. Don't lose the resonance with the belief that it's going to happen. Stay in the trust. I don't know. You would use different language. How would you describe that?
Well, I'd talk about resonance and that coherence, because it all comes down to coherence, having the internal alignment between your nervous system, your thoughts and your emotions. The identity shift is important so that you start operating from a different frequency. But if you think about, if you go into an auditorium or a cathedral, shout out your name, it comes straight back as an echo. It has to. Mm-hmm. But resonance is a little bit different. It's, an echo is sound returning. But resonance is when one system impacts another. So maybe the cleanest demonstration there is if you have a tuning fork and you sort of hit it and it's vibrating, it's going to start impacting a second tuning fork. Mm-hmm. So it's when you are aligned and have that coherence, you're impacting the morphogenetic field, the collection of thoughts, so that it has to find you. And one of the other things I love to think about or share with people is often we talk about that old saying, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. Well, what would happen if you got rid of all the hay? What's left is the needle. So this is when we go into different timelines and alternate versions of ourselves, where there are so many possibilities, and you choose the possibility that you want. Then it's about collapsing all the other probabilities so that this one has no choice.
Right.
But to align with you. To me, that's instead of looking for the needle in the haystack, burn the hay.
Burn the hay.
Is there. And that's why with the entrainment series, they're in that order. It always starts with coherence. And then resonance, the world starts to respond. That's your relationship with the outside world. And that also shows you that if your outer world isn't as you wish it to be, then it's come back to coherence. There's something out of alignment within you. Get that into alignment. And then, as I said, it's holding that. And that's where that lack of faith or doubt comes in. And how beautiful the gifts that you had from a few people just keeping you on track and saying, keep the faith, keep the faith. And just
keep the faith.
Did. And then
it was just the message I needed at that moment, because the doubt crept in, and he was just like, keep the faith, you'll get it. And I'm like, yeah, right. That little reminders from home, I call them. Yeah, I will, won't I? Because I was so sure it was going to happen. My guides told me, and I went into doubt. Yeah, keep the faith.
Yeah, because the masters and the gurus were able to manifest instantly.
Absolutely.
And as I said, they're operating from different frequencies, which allow for that possibility and probabilities. Whereas the density we're in has a time and space lag, which, if you think about it, is a good job, because if everything manifested instantly that we think, we'd soon go, oh, I didn't mean that. Oh. We'd soon tidy up our thoughts.
Absolutely. Like some of the parents in the telepathy tapes say this too. When you know that your child is listening to every thought you have, you really start to clean up your thinking. And I thought, what a great way to clean up your thinking, instead of criticizing and hating and getting upset, like all the negative thoughts that we engage in. When you know somebody's listening. I had someone on the show years ago called Pam Osley. Do you know Pam? Anyway,
No.
she does color therapy, and she's a psychic and amazing. And she talked about this in the timelines and burning the hay. And so she had this boyfriend who broke up with her when she was young and moved away. I don't want to be with you. I don't love you. He moved away. And she decided, no, this is the man I'm going to marry. And when I share this story, when she shared it on the show, when I share it on other shows, people say, but you can't create in somebody else's reality. She just decided, this is the man I'm going to marry. So she just kept the faith, like just kept pointed in that direction. This is the man, even though he'd moved away out of the country or out of the state. And he came back, and they reconnected and fell in love and got married and were married for 30 years. But she was just sure that that was the man she wanted to be with. There's no other alternative. That's him. He might not think so. And people say, but you can't create in other people's reality, but you can change timelines. And that's what she's talking about. There was a parallel reality where we were together. And instead of being on the reality where we weren't together, I shifted my focus, my consciousness, to the reality where we were. And that's what manifested. Yeah, burning the hay, as you say.
Totally.
Right.
And that is a different perspective and take on the people who say you can't, and again, you think about on materialization and manifestation, there's lots of different possibilities and probabilities that have to come in. So again, going back to the metaphor, if you're building a house in this density, you can go and, watch the builders build the wall and say, oh, no, can we have an arch there? Oh, can we have a doorway here? Oh, I want this. You can change it, but it takes time to build, put the plumbing in and decorate it. When it's
what I'm going through right now. But yeah, anyway, go on.
You can't see it. You have to trust. but also know that there is a lot of different possibilities. Like if it's in terms of, work and other companies being involved and other people being involved, then there's a lot of things that have to sort of line up that mean that you're, like finding the parking space at the right time, the right space, just as you're driving in. And think about how magnificent that is. And we forget the miracles and the manifestations that we create every single day. And once you do, you realize your own brilliance, your own magnificence. And if you study it, how it came about, which is, again, what multidimensional intelligence is all about, having a structure, then you realize that there are certain feelings, patterns, ways of being that create a different reality where you're aligning with a different timeline, a different version of yourself, because there's many of us.
Yeah.
This is what
we
we're
were
paying
just,
attention to.
as I said, we did the Elevate show, so I'm recording this on the same day that I did a live Elevate show with Kristen and Claudia, and we were talking about that this morning. So the synchronicities, we're talking about dimensions and multidimensional parallel lives. And yeah, the parking spaces is a great way. I have this years ago when I was running the Academy of Light, somebody gave me this little angel in a little plastic, I don't know, resin thing. And I remember somebody gave it to me. Someone gave it to me and I thought, oh, what am I going to do with this? And then I stuck it in the car and I said, right, you'll be my parking angel. So I, glued this angel into my car and I said, you're the parking angel. And I completely have faith and trust in her to bring me the parks that I want. But even when the parking angel is not working, and you've driven around and around and around half a dozen times, it's still keeping that faith rather than driving home and catching a taxi, just saying, I know that there's the perfect park for me. It's like keeping it, even when you can't find it in the moment. Like, yep, it's going to be there. It'll be there. It'll be there. And that happens to me so often. Just it stretches me to keep that resonance with what you want to happen instead of giving up and saying, yeah.
And the frequency that finds that space, that finds that. So, it's finding that perfect match. Mm-hmm. And there's also, I'm sure you've seen, if I do watch television, it's usually programs that have a little bit slant on this way. I believe there was a fantastic series on, I think it was Apple, called Dark or Dark Matter, which has multiple timelines as he tries to align with a time in his life where he regrets the decision. Right. And I love those series where you can watch it again and you pick up the nuances. So when I was explaining the multidimensional field scans, when I was watching Disclosure Day, and her gifts suddenly come online where she's speaking Korean, Russian, knows certain things. And it's, how do you know? I don't know how I know. I just...
And you're like, no. Yeah.
I thought, yep, there we go.
Yeah. But I have to say, in that movie, I've never seen, in all the years I've been doing this work, I've never seen it happen that fast. I suppose there's a bit of poetic license because it's a movie that they can't go through the journey of how her gifts sort of open up over time, or she becomes, more in resonance with that sort of ability. It just happens, bang, where she's doing it. But I've never seen that. I have had many people on the show. I had one woman, Valentina, I know what's her name, starts with a V, where she started channeling light language, and she started channeling many different light languages, and she had no idea what was happening to her, and she was trying to stop it because it would spontaneously just fly out of her mouth, and she didn't know what she was saying and or what was happening. And so she thought that if she can, when she was out in the supermarket or out of her house, it would start, and she'd just start blabbering in this light language, and she thought it was very embarrassing. And she said, we all laughed, we both laughed. And she said, maybe if I wore a hat, it would stop it. So she was walking around the place with hats on all the time, trying to stop the light language from flying out of her mouth. But a tinfoil hat, but it wasn't a tinfoil hat. But yeah, but that was the only person I've ever spoken to, which was somewhat similar to the girl in Disclosure Day. but it still didn't
There's
happen so
something very
fast.
interesting though about language and light language, because which also came from a movie, Arrival, which is quite an old movie now.
Fabulous
But again,
movie.
when the hectopods arrive and they use a different kind of language, they also have different beliefs around, they don't operate from the past, present, future. They have a different concept of time. And here's where language and consciousness have a very strong link, and I've just written about it, is that she starts having dreams and visions, and she doesn't realize that those dreams and visions are about her future. But of course, the language that she's trying to decipher and understand has the belief around, a different belief around time and past, present, future, where they're all together. So when you're saying this person starts talking light language, it would automatically start activating other levels of consciousness in them, in you. And I suspect that, Karen, you also found this yourself when your gifts started to come online and when you were channeling the masters and the language that they used, that it accelerated your own psychic abilities and gifts in other ways.
Yeah, I think it was a slow burn for me. I've been thinking about this stuff for a long time, since I was a child, and I'm in my 60s now. So it was a bit of a slow burn. And there are still, like, even though I've got access to amazing, the morphogenic field, the infinite field of all creative possibility, even though I've got access, like I can ask any question and get an instant answer, I still feel like I'm in preschool, not even kindergarten with this stuff,
Yes.
you know, like the telepathy. And, you know, I feel like it's not for the gifted, and they're not gifts. This is abilities that every single human has, and we're all going in this direction. There are some that are a bit further ahead than others, and some people like you with the curiousness to want to be further ahead and to want to teach and understand it on an intellectual level, so that you can teach the greater populace and not just say, oh, I just receive it from my spirit guides, which a lot of people say, and which is actually what I say. Oh, I just receive it from my spirit guides, which make a lot of people go, well, then you're just talking crap. But when you've got that scientific basis behind you and research, people say, oh, I'm listening now. Like, that's the greater populace. But we're all heading in that direction. And
Totally.
One day the human society will be a telepathic society, not in my lifetime, but in a future lifetime. And I've spoken to different ETs that have shown me how that works. And it's profoundly insane how it works. It's like, it's what our technology does, they can do with their minds. Like, they've shown me the way when you're in a Zoom room, how you can be talking to many and everyone's receiving the same information. So imagine doing that telepathically, talking to a crowd and everyone's receiving the same stream of information. And then you can compartmentalize that and go into like Zoom rooms, so that you can have privacy, or you can open it up or shut it down. It's incredible what's possible. It's incredible what's possible. And as I say, I feel like I'm not even in kindergarten with this stuff. I'm just at the very beginning, but I can do more than what most people can do. So as a humanity, we're babes in the water with all this stuff.
I agree. And for me, it's been such fun to play in the multidimensional fields and learn. Having been labeled a course junkie by many of my friends and experienced always seeking and searching, it's actually been a delight to be able to still learn and grow through the multidimensional fields and know that there is so much more. And I loved what you just said of a Zoom room and the breakout room sending different messages. And it brings to mind some of the books I read on people who've had abductions, and UFO paranormal experiences, where they say they're taken almost into a huge auditorium and told what to expect. I don't know, as you said that, it triggered certain memories and things that I've read. And I, again, believe that when you read information and it resonates with you, that it's just an echo of that which you already know, except most of us like external validation. So and you get that validation maybe through a movie, through a book, and it sits well with you. That's the resonant returning.
I remember I first started noticing my conversations with God, if you like, when I was reading the book Conversations with God. Like, so there's Neil Donald Walsh having this, channeling experience or psychic experience or download experience or whatever label, where he's talking to what he identifies as God, whatever your idea of God is, the morphogenic field of infinite creative possibility. And while I was reading his questions, because he had the very human questions, I was having my own questions and I was getting the information directly coming through. And so instead of getting the information from the book, I was just getting it directly. That's the first time I noticed that was happening. And I wondered, has that been happening my whole life? Like, when did that start? But reading a book, like you say, when you read stuff that your soul knows or that your higher self knows that you're here to do or to study, there's just a knowing. There's not a psychic insight. It's just a knowing. It's like, and you don't know how you know. And I think that's the best. That's the best, because there's no time. It's just instant. Yeah. You're just
and that is also learning a high level of trust. As I said, having been very skeptic, but also realizing the gift was in having that knowing and that high level of discernment. I look back and think of where I felt frustrated at maybe what I thought was the lack of gifts, that actually, it was just as it was meant to be.
I don't know. You say you have a lack of gifts, but after reading, what was it called that you sent me? The scan?
The multidimensional field scan, yes.
I don't think you have any lack of any gifts. Sorry. There's no lack. There's no lack in there, honey. There's no.
Thank you. And again, I have to shout right back to you. You're such a gift, Karen, in terms of the real deal. When there is
you're gonna make me cry.
And that was clearly highlighted in your scan. Look at the upper chakra, 80, 90. Really, really high. And that you are the kind of person who, from StreamYard, Zoom, your live calls, just like the technology you said is available when you speak with the ETs, you are doing that. You may not realize it, but you are doing that by your presence, and that in a room, you're the kind of person who can walk into the room and just shift the energy or send people a message, a positive message, whether it's keep the faith, instantly and telepathically by your very presence. That is, it's always a pleasure for me to see people operating at such a high level. So thank you for the gift of allowing me to do that.
You're going to make me cry, but I have to tell you that's not every day. I don't do that.
We're human.
Not every day. There are times when I'm just as miserable as other people. But I have to say, like you, Carol, I have a really curious mind. So when I am doing my misery, and Kristen and I have spoken about this on Elevate many times. She's like me too. When we do our misery, I always ask, why? Where is this coming from? What am I going to do with it? How am I going to change it? And what am I experiencing now? Like, the curiosity takes over the misery guts. Do you know what I mean? And I think that curiousness, like you said at the beginning, you were so curious that you wanted to study with the masters and know what they know. If they can do it, why can't I? And I think that, religion has a lot to say about people being special or gifted or more holy or sainted. We make people so special that they can do it, but I can't, which was something that I bought into as a younger girl too. I can't do the psychic thing. I can't be psychic. I'm not a psychic. It was an identity that I held.
Yes.
But when we hold the identity that we are multidimensional beings, logged in or tapped into the infinite morphogenic field of infinite possibility and higher intelligence, then anything's possible, right? If I'm logged in or tapped into that, then there is no I can't anymore. There's just, what do I want? And where am I going to place my focus? Yeah.
That's the remembering who we truly are, remembering our brilliance, our multidimensional nature, all the possibilities that we can align with. The masters, the gurus showed us what's possible. It is our time to remember.
Absolutely. when you're tapping into your non-psychic, just knowing downloads,
maybe that's an identity I need to shift into now. Because you've said it several times when you shifted your identity, and I feel I've heard this a number of times, and I feel maybe I need to shift my identity and acknowledge that psychic part. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, as I say, I think we're all psychic, and I say this over and over again because it's something I grappled with, wanting to know about psychic ability and not having the identity, and bumping up against all the paradigms that are placed on psychics. They're woo-woo. You've got to have a crystal ball. They're crazy. It's not intelligence, only for dumb people. And I didn't want to identify myself with any of that. But, looking into it, we're all operating only psychically before any of our physical attributes kick in. Like we can't see, we can't smell, we can't taste, we can't hear, we can't even feel physically. When we're born, the only sense we have are our psychic senses. We're completely tapped in telepathically to our parents, mother specifically, and we know everything they think we know, and everything they feel we feel. And so it's the only operating system we have until the other ones come online, and then we start to rely on those. And we forget about all that psychic stuff. Like we just forget, but it's sitting there, ready to go. It just needs to be focused on, just put back on the table. We've got 3 minutes left to go. Anything you'd like to share with us before we go? This has been such a fascinating conversation.
From what you just said, I was reminded of, we've talked about the telepathy tapes and those very gifted children. Children are very gifted. And for a time, I was teaching something called extraocular vision.
I want to talk about that. Yeah.
It's the ability to see without your eyes. Now, of course, as we get older into adult phase, our brain and our nervous system gets hardwired in a particular way. But I had the opportunity to work with some young children. It's usually best between the ages of 6 and 9. And one lovely little boy called Maxie, on his second session, you have those beautiful mind folds and you do brain gym and a few other things. He was already reading and describing the pictures in a book to me. And the third time, it just happened instantly. Incredible. The other thing that was so beautiful, Karen, was that afterwards we went downstairs. His parents were waiting downstairs, and his mother had a headache. And not only had he activated his extraocular vision, but when she said that, he naturally put his hand on her head to pass some energy exchange there. So it opens up many different things when we encourage that in young children, rather than shut down their abilities and clip their wings. Whereas as adults, we then have to go through the trial and testing of remembering who we are.
How old was he when he put his hands on the head? 4.
6 years old.
Oh, I know, so beautiful. I know, so beautiful.
Honestly, my jaw was dropping as well. He's such a beautiful little boy, but it happened so quickly, so naturally, so easily with extraocular vision. And it shows us what we are capable of. And extraocular vision isn't just about not being able to see without your eyes, because people will say, well, what use is that? But it encourages different ways of learning. It's been also linked to accelerating their learning abilities, their schooling gets better, their marks in certain studies also increase. So they're doing lots more study in these fields, and it's beautiful to see what's possible. And adults can do this as well. It's just for many adults, it takes a little bit longer because of the conditioning and programming. But when you start to question that paradigm, that glass bowl that we're in, and start breaking it down, then we really do open up to infinite possibilities.
Infinite possibilities. Absolutely. There's so much to learn and grow in this lifetime. We're never going to be bored, are we, as we start to really engage in this way of thinking. There's just so much to learn about, who we are and what's possible. Like, what else is possible? And I just love that the telepathy tapes became so viral. I'm like, Joe Rogan's talking about telepathy and they've got it on the news. And I'm like, we are living in new times. Like, the paradigm has shifted. Yeah, and you're doing wonderful work.
It impacts so many people through their telepathic, through the telepathic tapes. And this goes back to our superpower. When you're operating from a higher space and place, when you're in coherence, you are an electromagnetic being that impacts everybody around you and impact them positively.
Yeah. Carol, it's been such a delight and a pleasure to speak with you today. Your website is multi-dimensionalintelligence.com. And there, get that scanning, that download non-psychic scanning reading thing that I got, which is fascinating, and so much more. But we've run out of time. Thank you so much for being on the show. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the flexibility in timing. I would have got up at 2 a.m.
No, that's not reasonable. But we'll do this again another time. Lots to talk about. Big love.
Yeah.